Chargers rookie Oronde Gadsden II is picking up where he left off in minicamp with a big day on Saturday as the connection between him and Justin Herbert continues to get better.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons together, but this is our 8th year as a host of Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers, as always, for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss a show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, the Chargers have been searching for that next pass-catching tight end for a long time, and it seems like they may have finally found him in the form of rookie fifth-round pick Oronde Gadsden II. He's taken that strong start and taking it into training camp as well. Tre Harris, also another weapon for Justin Herbert, has signed on the dotted line, and he is in practice and making plays right away. And also, good news on the defensive standpoint with Elijah Molden being activated off of the PUP list.
Yeah, and also have to talk about the most impressive defender so far. Maybe we shouldn't be surprised. Daiyan Henley, who had interceptions on back-to-back days on Friday and Saturday. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And David, the player that had the best individual performance of any mini camp players on the Chargers was Oronde Gadsden, who kind of really exploded onto the scene during minicamp and showed us, hey, maybe this is someone we shouldn't be taking lightly as far as what his role could be as a rookie. But with Oronde Gadsden, it's always going to be what happens when the pads come on, and we'll talk about that. But we know that he can catch the ball and has just a really innate receiving ability that they just don't have elsewhere on the roster. I mean, he has the most talent as a receiver of any tight end that they have, but we saw on Saturday that it was him that stood out again. According to Eric Smith, he had 3 receptions on Saturday, 2 of them going for 20-plus yards. If you didn't see the beautiful deep ball that he caught from Justin Herbert on the Chargers' social media, I would suggest that you do. I mean, just a deep ball down the sideline, perfectly thrown ball over the shoulder in stride to Oronde Gadsden, who caught it full extension and just really made it look easy after creating great separation. But David, it was great to see after we heard earlier, hey, this Oronde Gadsden Justin Herbert connection is growing a little bit, that it's continuing now in training camp, kind of where it matters most for him.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And Justin Herbert has showcased throughout his career that if he has a receiving tight end, he is going to utilize them, whether it's Hunter Henry, whether it's Jared Cook, whether it's Gerald Everett, it doesn't matter. If you have some receiving chops at the tight end position, Justin Herbert is going to be looking for you. And I think Oronde Gadsden has all of the speed, all of the receiving ability that has been lacking from the middle of this Chargers offense. A guy that can really terrorize defensive backs and linebackers, a guy that can really make plays down the seam, down the field. I mean, the Chargers have a storied history of having one of the best receiving tight ends in the history of the National Football League. Hopefully, Oronde Gadsden is ready to step in and make some plays for this Chargers offense.
Like I said before, it'll have a lot to do with what happens when the pads come on. Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator, said the same thing, and that starts on Tuesday. He will be one of the guys I'm most excited to see put the pads on, and we'll talk about that on tomorrow's show as we ramp up to Tuesday's practice, where we actually get to see it for the first time in San Diego at USD. But it comes down to this, in an offense that has some really big questions about if there's enough firepower for Justin Herbert, this dude is obviously a weapon and seems like he'll have to be out there if they're trying to let this offense reach the full heights that it can. But that wasn't the only rookie who made waves on the field, because Tre Harris in the last couple of practice has been on the field, which is making waves because after a couple of second-round rookies signed their contract, Tre Harris also signed last week and got in the next day to training camp practice on Friday. Made a couple of plays back on Saturday as well, but this is more just about him being out there for this important time, getting back on the field, and not missing time where it felt like he wouldn't be able to catch up.
Yeah, this is essential time for him. I mean, especially, having a little bit of getting behind the 8 ball a little bit with the conditioning aspects, as we heard from, the Chargers wide receiver coach Sanjay Lal. So this right here, you just didn't want this to snowball into missing significant time. really, when you look at it, it really only boils down to missing one practice, like start of the practice, a couple of days also when he was supposed to report. And so I'm glad that's all behind us. I mean, we know, especially now with Mike Williams retiring, that Tre Harris is going to factor in very, very heavily into the Chargers receiving group. His skill set is very vital to the Chargers offense, because last year, Ladd McConkey was the only guy that can consistently beat man-to-man coverage. And Tre Harris, what he did in college was do that all the time, was get open, really, really destroy man coverage. And that's something that the Chargers really need to add to their offense. So the more reps he's out there, the more time he gets to spend with Justin Herbert establishing that chemistry, the more they can trust him to be on the field and make plays.
Absolutely, and it just feels like that room is pretty wide open right now as far as what the roles are going to be behind Ladd McConkey, who's pretty obviously the number one guy. And it, worked out for him to some extent. Per Alex Insdorf, he got over 10% more than what last year's 55th overall pick got. He got 71% of his contract guaranteed or thereabouts. Last year was 60.2% for the 55th overall pick. So good for him getting as much money as he possibly can, but most importantly, getting back on the field, especially because of what happened with Mike Williams and his surprise retirement that really just opened up a significant hole at the X receiver position. But what was interesting is the Chargers actually aren't playing him at X receiver right now, at least not exclusively. And that's what we learned from Greg Roman on Saturday, who said, we definitely want him to get a base at something. Right now, it's probably more the Z. He's got some X reps as well, but this was the more interesting part. If you're an outside receiver, you're an outside receiver, so you can be an X, you could be a Z. You need to start somewhere, however, and in picking that, we're starting him at Z, similar to where Josh Palmer played, if that makes any sense. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, specifically, because of what the X and Z receivers do typically.
Yeah.
The main thing being that you need to know about those positions and the letters that are attributed or attached to them is just that the X receiver is usually the guy outside on the boundary by himself on the line of scrimmage, has to be able to defeat press coverage, has to be able to win one-on-one matchups, deep balls down the sideline, jump balls. All of those things are usually the X receiver, your biggest guy that can play the biggest and make those type of plays. All things that Tre Harris checks those boxes for. But right now, David, that's not where their focus is.
Yeah, which is really surprising because honestly, Tre Harris, the way he profiles, it is best at the X receiver position. He's a guy that had a lot of experience doing that. And me personally, I've always said it and I'll continue to say it. I feel like Quentin Johnston is perfect at the Z receiver, especially because most of the time with the Z receivers, they put that receiver in motion quite a lot. And that's what Quentin Johnston needs. Get him a runway, get him, get those long strides moving forward, get him in space and let him kind of dominate from there. And, they said that they're going to move Quentin to X as well. They're going to move these guys around, which I believe they will. But I just still firmly believe Tre Harris' skill set works best at X and Q's works best at Z.
Yeah, and you could make the same argument for Keandre Lambert-Smith as well, probably, who was another guy Greg Roman mentioned could play the X. He said 4 guys, Quentin Johnston, Tre Harris, KLS, and also Jalen Reagor. So those are the guys they feel that can do it. I think Jalen Reagor probably even is more of a Z than an X, but can play the X and can do that if he needs to. But he's not a big guy, not a big physically dominant receiver, which we know Tre Harris can be. Quentin Johnston has the physical capabilities to be a physically dominant receiver, but he just doesn't play like a big receiver. And the things specific, like the fact that they keep trying to do this with Quentin when it's obviously not a fit for him, to try to run those routes, to have him up against the line of scrimmage. Yes, he has to get better at those things, but Tre Harris is the guy that fits all of those things best. And what it feels like to me is that they wanted Tre Harris maybe to start at Z because they assumed that Mike Williams was going to be manning the X, which means, hey, how do we get this rookie on the field when we already have a go-getter type of guy, Mike Williams, who is a boundary X receiver? Well, we can put him at the Z and have him compete against Quentin Johnston, have him compete there. So that way you could potentially get Mike Williams and Tre Harris and Ladd McConkey on the field at the same time. And now that they started that way, maybe they don't want to continue, or totally change things up on him, right? But I just, to me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, you need that position. That's something that you have to have addressed. That was one of the main places in your receiving core where you had to make a big improvement and find someone that could work on the outside to fit better with Ladd McConkey. I don't see that with Quentin Johnston. I don't think that's the best case for Jalen Reagor. And I also think with KOS, another guy where he should be able to fill a role for you, but I don't think that's at X receiver. So we'll see how it shakes out because some of those guys have had big moments as well. But we still have more to get into, including the most dominant defensive player so far. And no surprise, it's Daiyan Henley who's looking to have a huge year 3, maybe even taking that next step into stardom. We're getting into him and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. And for me, what I always struggle with is not having football, because with football, football was football. The other sports don't usually match up, but when you have something riding on it, it definitely makes it a lot closer to football. So these are the seasons, my prime seasons. I know going for Scotty over the weekend at the Open Championship was so much fun, and getting to go on that ride, knowing I had something at stake, was really, really good. But whether I'm placing a same game parlay or watching a bet right into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. This is an ad by BetterHelp. Workplace stress is an all-time high. 61% of the global workforce is reporting higher than normal stress levels. This summer is the perfect time to take small steps to focus on your wellness and manage the challenges that come with your workday. Of course, most of us just can't quit our jobs and take endless vacations, but we can start small, whether it's getting outside for a few minutes, adding movement into your day, or talking to someone who can help you navigate life's challenges. That's where BetterHelp comes in, because if you need to find something that can fit into your busy schedule, like me working 2 jobs, really 3 if you can't watching my baby, which is easily the hardest of my jobs, it is so much easier to have something online where I don't have to figure out when I have time to drive over there and what the commute's going to be, how long I need a babysitter for. So much better to have the flexibility of online therapy, which makes it so easy to fit in sessions into my busy schedule, no matter where I am. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off of their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. David, we still have more to get into from training camp, because we haven't talked much about the defensive side of things so far, and that's kind of how these practices go. Before the pads come on, it's really going to lean towards the offensive side as far as who has the biggest advantages, and that's no exception right now. But there's one guy that has been making plays since the beginning of last year, and that is Daiyan Henley. So it was great to see Daiyan getting his first interception off of Justin Herbert of training camp on Friday, then getting his second interception on Saturday, interceptions on back-to-back days. Something, David, where we know he has the potential to be one of, if not the best coverage linebackers in the NFL. And that's something that is getting off to a hot start, and it probably helps to have a labrum that's not torn as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you from experience, it's pretty hard to raise your arms up to catch a football when your shoulder is not really working properly. So
Yeah.
to see him being able to notch the interceptions, it's big, because that's the thing that we've said and you've said multiple times that can really enter him into that next echelon of middle linebackers in the National Football League, is getting those turnovers. Like, we already know he affects the game as a run stopper, as a great, defender against the pass, like just absolutely locking down tight ends with Derwin James. They were a legendary tandem in that respect. If he wants to be that, top linebacker in the NFL, if he wants to get to those all-pro honors that everybody is saying that he is capable of achieving, it means getting his hands on more footballs and taking the football away at a higher clip. If he can translate what he's doing right now in practice in the games on Sundays, that's when we're going to be talking about Daiyan Henley as one of the best linebackers in the league.
And hopefully he can take the fact that he wasn't even in the honorable mentions of the ESPN's top 10 linebackers, according to anonymous executives and scouts.
Ridiculous,
like
by the way.
The league. Hopefully he can put that chip on his shoulder to enter himself into that conversation of a top 10 linebacker and kind of cement himself there, because I think if he gets in, I don't think he's going down on the list anytime soon. But he is someone that has unnatural instincts at the position as a former defensive back, being able to read route concepts. That the first interception he had on Friday was taking a ball away from Ladd McConkey on a 3rd and 5 throw from Justin Herbert, according to Daniel Popper. They know, everyone knows you're looking for Ladd McConkey on those big downs. Still, no one was able to stop it for him as a rookie. Daiyan Henley, one of those guys that can make a play against a Ladd McConkey type of player. You have Jesse Minter also saying he's just so dialed in and wanting to be perfect every play. I think you're never going to be perfect, but you really just chase execution and being in the right spot. So for him this year, to not be fighting for a spot, to be the green dot, to be the main guy in the middle, and to be able to hopefully pick up where he left off and show he can make those game-changing plays is big. And also, the one other place, not just getting interceptions as a pass rusher. So we're seeing it against the passing game in this way. We need to also see how he's able to affect the passer as a blitzer too once the pads come on. But in other big news for the Chargers defense, Elijah Molden has officially been activated off the PUP list. David, great to see him back still at the beginning of camp.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they didn't rush him back, and they took their time to make sure that he was 100% ready, full go, because he is super important to to maximizing the ability or the potential of this Chargers defense. He is the key that unlocks Derwin James being able to be close to the line of scrimmage, because you can trust him on the back end to be one of those 3 safeties that the Chargers like to put on the field more often than not. They like to have Alohi and Elijah Molden back there, and they like to have, their second team all-pro slot cornerback, aka Derwin James, close to the line of scrimmage in that slot, or big nickel position. The only way that you can do that is by having Elijah Molden on the back end, having a guy that that you can trust. It could be a good tackler, can take the football away. It's great to know that he's back and that he has plenty of time to get comfortable, get out there on the football field, and be back with his teammates, because he is a huge part of this defense and the potential of it.
He's probably the best deep safety on the team, on a team that has Derwin James on it, who, when he's asked to do that, can do that at a high level still. But yeah, he is super important. And I think the underrated parts of his game, the communication, I think that's going to be so important for the young guys that are out there trying to learn this defense, trying to put it into action, to have that guy behind them, getting them lined up, having them in the right place. But I think the more important thing is just for his body to be out there trying to get back up to full speed. As we've talked about before, it's not always, he broke his leg basically. It's not super easy for you to just trust your muscles, trust your legs, trust your bones once you come back from an injury like that. So for him to have this much time before the season, to not have him, coming back in week 1 or, having to miss a few games into the season, such good news for this defense. Not necessarily surprising. You were hoping this would be the case, but I do think that we could reasonably expect him to have an even better season in year 2 now that he has an actual offseason with Jesse Minter and doesn't get added the first week of the year, which has to be insanely tough. But also a shout out and a hat tip to RJ Mickens, who got his first interception of training camp. That's really nice to see, David, a rookie safety, the only really youthful player at their position. No shot at Tony Jefferson or the rest of those guys, but he is the guy that represents your future potentially at the position, because you don't have a lot of young guys in that room, and it's nice to see him making a big play early on.
It is. It's good for him. It's great for his confidence level, because who knows how much he's really going to see the field during the regular season, right? He's at the very back end of the depth chart. We know and we feel very confident that he's going to factor in pretty heavily on special teams. He's going to be a big part of that. He's probably going to be a core 4 guy. I feel like that's, a pretty safe bet to say that. But for him to be out there making plays on defense, is only going to allow his stock to continue to rise.
Well, it's great to see it now, but the biggest thing there is Elijah Molden did break his leg, right? You did have Alohi Gilman on an IR trip last season. At the end of the year last year, you were using old Eddie Jackson back there at the back end of your defense because you got so desperate at the position. So Marcus May, right? There's Kendall Williamson was out there getting snaps last year as a practice squad guy. Depth is so important. So if this guy can show that if you need him in a pinch defensively to get out there and give you something, he has the physical tools that should translate to the next level. I'm excited to see him in pads. I'm excited to see him in the preseason, because yes, he has to, earn a role, and he might not play much defensively. First things first, you got to make the team, You're the second of 2 6th-round picks. You got to go out there and prove it. And
it's not guaranteed.
4 veterans in front of you, including Tony Jefferson, to go along with Gilman, Derwin James, and Elijah Molden, that's not a given. you have to go out there and earn it on this team, especially with just how much depth they have built. But we still have more great stuff to get into because even though Oronde Gadsden was great, the rest of the offense is pretty disjointed on Saturday, and I think I know the reason why. So we're going to get into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Ready. Rougiette Ready is the next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast on average in 15 minutes, and effects can last up to 36 hours so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked for you before, Rougiette might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. I love another part of it is that it's completely online. Rougiette connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. Head to Rougiette.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit Rougiette website for full safety information. David, we still have more great stuff to get into because there's a lot that's happening at this point of training camp, but there are some things to be expected as well. And I think part of that includes this young offense looking like a really young offense, which is what it sounds like happened on Saturday. According to Daniel Popper, it was a very disjointed practice, guys not being in the right spot, guys dropping the football, and a lot more. And I think the biggest reason is this is what happens when you have, one of the youngest offensive units in the entire league, and I think we're seeing that. But thank you, as always, for making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, make sure to check out Locked On Sports today because the Locked On NFL Top 100 is here, voted on by the NFL host on Locked On Podcast Network. Our Top 100 was formed by experts that cover these teams and players every single day. Justin Herbert, QB6 on that list. I don't know if a lot of people would take exception to that, but Jaden Daniels ahead of him. So make sure you guys go check that out on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from. David, according to Daniel Popper, it was pretty ugly on Saturday for the offense, where he said, quote, never got a rhythm on Saturday. And that was something we got really used to hearing last year when Justin Herbert was not on the field. But Justin Herbert is on the field this time, and it still felt like things just weren't clicking for that side of the ball. And to me, it screams youth, it screams inexperience, and that's why I'm not super concerned that it's happening at the beginning of camp. Hopefully this is something you can work out now, so you're seeing these days much less later on.
Yeah, I mean, you look across the position groups on offense at the skill positions. You look at the running back room, very, very young. With the guy who's sitting at number one right now is the number one pick for the Chargers, Omarion Hampton. Obviously, with Najee Harris being out, as a veteran, that's going to be very much needed in the young skill position groups that the Chargers have. Then you have the wide receiver room, which outside of Jalen Reagor, very, very young. Then, the tight end room, you have a couple of veterans in that room. That's a solid room. But outside of the tight end room, there's a lot of inexperience there. A lot of a lot of moving parts, a lot of new pieces. They have to find that symbiosis and that chemistry, and that's going to take time. It's very, very early in camp, so I don't think it's any reason to be alarmed. But these things are going to happen. You would rather have them happen in the beginning of training camp rather than at the end of training camp when they're getting ready to kick it off for real.
At least this year, Justin Herbert should be out there for all of training camp. Obviously,
yes.
If everything goes right, which just means you should get a better look at everyone. You should be able to find that chemistry. Like, it's hard for Quentin Johnson, Justin Herbert to get better chemistry in last training camp because Justin Herbert wasn't out there for a lot of it. And, it was just totally defensive dominated games or practices last year when it was, Easton Stick and then, Max Duggan and Luis Perez. It was just pretty horrible to even hear about with just how little you could actually take away from what the offense was trying to build. Now, they're able to at least build towards where they're going to be right now with their quarterback, and all of these guys get chances with the star to build that chemistry. But part of the disjointedness of the offense, not on Saturday, but on Friday, with Daiyan Johnson having some early struggles at the center position. This is per Daniel Popper. Herbert bobbled a couple of Johnson snaps. One snap in the 2-point conversion period was very high and led to a busted play. David, this is something that had to come with the territory. That's the thing about playing center. There's so many things to think about. One of the maybe easiest things isn't even easy, and that's just snapping the football. Something that you have to get very much used to. Something that gets, someone like Josh Harris an all-pro vote because, he is so good at just snapping the football, then that's his entire job for the most part, right? Something that shouldn't be overlooked, but something that's already kind of rearing, its ugly head, was just the fact of the matter, which is this is going to take time. This probably isn't going to be pretty early. And are you even going to have enough time for him to kind of make up the ground that he has kind of missed out on never playing the position before?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really, really tough task. It's really, really hard to switch positions at the NFL level. You're just like, oh, well, it's just offensive line. No, it's definitely not just offensive line going from guard to center. There's so many responsibilities that the center has. Obviously, chief among them is making sure the football gets in the hands of the quarterback accurately. And so for Daiyan Johnson, like, these growing pains were going to happen. You're going to see it. It's going to happen. Hopefully, it stops after a few days, after some consistency, but also he's in a battle, right? It's going to be Bradley Bozeman one day. It's going to be Daiyan Johnson the other day at center. So he's going to really have to put in the work and to get where he needs to be the starter on this football team after fumbling some snaps, which is one of the most elementary parts of playing the center position. That's not a good start for him and his campaign on being the starting center of this football team.
Yeah, I don't think it's something that should be condemned too much at this point anyways, because like we said, it was expected. Neither of those, I don't think, turned into actual fumbles.
And it's very early.
What I would say, though, is just like, that's okay, but like, if it happened 3 times in the season, like, look back at last season, like, I can't think of a single time where Bradley Bozeman just airmailed Justin Herbert and, they lost 15 yards or they gave the ball away.
And they were in shotgun a lot because of his ankle.
They absolutely were. And don't take that part for granted. Like, you also have to be better at other things besides just snapping the football. But that is such an important part. And like, even if you mess up on that small aspect, that's also a big aspect of that job 3 times this season, it could change the trajectory of your whole year. Like, it could change the outcome of games. So that's the bare minimum. So he needs to get that locked in as quickly as possible because there's a lot of other things he still has to learn. But this is from Greg Roman. He said, if he plays center, which is on the line of scrimmage as opposed to off of the line of scrimmage, so things can happen a little quicker, and he's got to make all the calls, I think that's going to enhance him as an all-around football player and an offensive lineman. So even if he doesn't win the job, there are some aspects of this that could actually help him and help his understanding of what he needs to know, where he needs to be on a snap-to-snap basis. But they're best if he can figure it out and can actually play center, which is what they hope he can do. But as we're seeing, not as easy as people might expect. But one more thing I wanted to touch on here was just the fact that, according to Daniel Popper, it was Trey Lance getting the second team reps at quarterback on Saturday. Something we talked about going into the year. We talked about our biggest training camp battles. We brought up the backup quarterback position. But maybe Taylor Heinicke really is in a real competition and doesn't have the leg up maybe we thought.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Chargers brought him back, but they also gave Trey Lance a little bit more money than I think a lot of people were expecting for, what I think a lot of people thought was QB3 going into the off season. So now it seems like he might be legitimately QB2. Obviously, we know that the coaching staff and Greg Roman, they like an athletic quarterback. They like somebody who can run around, that has that ability to kind of run with the football. That's, been a big part of the quarterbacks that have been played under, Greg Roman. If you look at the Colin Kaepernicks and the Lamar Jacksons, obviously they want somebody with some athleticism. So it might be a little bit more legit to think that Trey Lance could be the backup to Justin Herbert, but also it's early days. So we'll have to see how he performs in the preseason, because the last time we saw him in the preseason, it was not a good showing.
Yeah, he turned the ball over 6 times, but also had over 400 yards of total offense, and 90 of those being rushing yards. So Trey Lance is an interesting experiment. Obviously, the Chargers are the third team to see if they can actually get Trey Lance right. So hard to say that he's going to factor in too much, and hopefully for the Chargers this season. But as this backup job kind of continues to be fought for during training camp, like this isn't to say, hey, Trey Lance got all the second team reps because he has now kind of usurped Taylor Heinicke for the time being as the second quarterback. I think it's more about giving them each the best shot. And when you're playing with the third string offense, you're not going to always have the guys out there to really show what you're able to do.
Yeah.
So I think that's what more of this was about. Now, you're also not going to take first team reps away from Justin Herbert either. But I do think as far as the backup goes, it's more about them giving him the best chance to put his best foot forward, as more than him actually being better than Taylor Heinicke or having a better chance at Taylor Heinicke to win the backup quarterback position in 2025. But a battle to be watched for regardless, and also a battle in which we're going to see a ton of these guys. Getting that fourth preseason game this year with the Hall of Fame game means overexposure. These guys are, we're going to be able to see, they're going to have a chance. It won't be from lack of opportunities why one of these guys doesn't end up getting that job. I'll say that. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. The good news is we have another practice today, and we'll be back with you guys tomorrow to talk about that and tell you which players we're most excited to see put the pads on, because this part of training camp is nice. It's great to have football back in any way, but you need the physicality. That's what makes football great. There's a reason we're not talking about the flag football Chargers. We're talking about the NFL Chargers, who play a physical brand of football under Jim Harbaugh, and those guys, and the guys who really have it and the guys who want to be physical are going to get a chance to let it shine on Tuesday's practice. We're going to tell you who has the most at stake once those pads come on. But make sure you guys don't miss it by subscribing or following for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening wherever you get your podcast from, as well as following us on all of our social media, because we post the show there every day as well, at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. But make sure you guys are with us tomorrow to talk about the biggest things coming out of today's practice. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.